Hello and welcome to the Flourishing Introvert Talks with me, Jo Rawbone. This is the podcast that celebrates the natural gifts of introverts so that we can flourish in all situations. Episode 176. What does it really mean to flourish as an introvert? Just this last weekend, I was asked a really important question by my accountability buddies. They asked me, how does it feel to flourish as an introvert? For context, I was exploring the next stages of my business with them, and because I've lived with the business name Flourishing Introverts for several years now, I assume that people understand the concept. More than that, I worried that people may even be a bit tired of me banging on about it on my podcast, in my emails, and on my TV show. And the fact that my two accountability buddies, who've been with me on this journey for probably 3 years now, were still asking me to go deeper into flourishing means there's probably more I need to say. Interestingly, I'd never been asked the question, how does it feel to flourish as an introvert? And it was an incredibly fruitful exploration for me, so much so that I wanted to share my answers with you here. So in this episode, I'll start by sharing what flourishing means to me before moving on to what is probably more important, which is how it feels to flourish. You may remember how the name Flourishing Introverts came into being. I was birthing the business and contemplating the name, then one morning I woke up with the word flourishing filling my mind. I knew in that moment that flourishing was exactly the word I wanted to associate with how I wanted introverts to be, even though I'd not yet looked it up. When I started my initial research, it was no surprise to find that flourishing means to grow or develop in a healthy, vigorous way, especially as the result of a particularly congenial environment. And let's not underplay the importance of that congenial environment. There are a number of words there that resonate with me as to how I feel about flourishing. Healthy, which speaks to me of authenticity, kindness, paying attention to self-care and to my needs, and at the same time doing no harm to others. Vigorous, this is about the energy and passion I feel for my mission, and yet without the healthy aspect just mentioned, I'm unlikely to have the necessary energy and motivation or stick-to-itiveness. Finally, the particularly congenial environment. Oh, this every time, please. I know I don't flourish where I'm not appreciated, where I feel out of place, and where I don't have time and space to do my best work or be the best version of me. It's one of the reasons I'm so vocal about short-sighted business leaders insisting that we all go back into the office. For whose benefit is my question. Anyway, I recorded my conversation with my accountability buddies about how flourishing feels to me, and what I'm about to share with you comes from the transcript. So, when I'm flourishing, I feel confident, and in the way Dr. Rob Young defines it, I feel able to take appropriate and effective action in spite of how challenging it may feel. And life has thrown many a curved ball my way and continues to do so. As I've said many times, confidence is not the absence of fear, but the acknowledgement of it, which is a healthy human response. It's also about the recognition that if the fear is real, it can be fuel. And if it's unfounded or I'm catastrophizing, I can bring myself back to the reality of the situation. When I'm flourishing, I feel kinder and more compassionate with myself, although I have to work hard at this because it's quite a battle for me sometimes. That's the self-trust piece that we talked about last week. When I'm flourishing, I feel more resilient and less likely to be pulled out of shape by others' expectations of me. I'm aligned with my purpose, fueled by my passion, and creatively pragmatic. I'm well aware that what got me here probably won't get me to where I'm headed next, and I'm open to change. When I'm flourishing, I feel appreciative of my skills, strengths, and knowledge. This means I'm not slow to offer them when I see the opportunity, and I'm not inclined to force them onto people either. I've learned how to articulate them positively, and I also know my development areas and weaknesses. I differentiate between the two of them as they're not always the same. I don't have to develop all of my weaknesses, only those that negatively impact how I show up in the world. And my development areas are not always weaknesses. Sometimes I'm developing my strengths. When I'm flourishing, I feel fulfilled. And for me, it's hard to separate fulfillment and flourishing. I'm expansive in my being, pursuing projects that really matter to me, and finally being who I really am. I'm using the skills, talents, gifts and knowledge I've gained over my long career in worthwhile ways. And I'm intentionally creating a legacy in the introverts who work with me or the others who are touched by my work. When I'm flourishing, I feel okay to be vulnerable, powerfully vulnerable, as I expose my soft underbelly and show the world that I'm not perfect. I'm not the finished article. I still have much to learn. And I'm aware that learning is one thing, application is entirely another, and it's the two combined that are so powerful. I'm able to practice situational humility and say, I don't know how to tackle this, without shame and without guilt. And I'm now able to ask for help, again, something it's taken me a long time to do. When I'm flourishing, I feel so much gratitude for who I am, for what I have, and for what is around me. That's partly because I choose to see so many things to be grateful for. In our world intent on drama and bad news, I can find goodness and joy in many everyday small things. Yesterday, a friend shared a video of a bee in a pollen-laden poppy, and that made my heart sing. Today I've watched and listened to the stair rods of rain with a smile on my face, knowing my garden would be relishing every last drop. And I'll choose to delight in the petrichor, which is the smell of the rain. When I'm flourishing, I feel secure enough to practice self-leadership. I feel very strongly that we don't have the right to lead others until we can lead ourselves. But what does self-leadership really mean? To me, very simply put, it's having a clear vision of a desired future, aligning my actions accordingly, and treading lightly as I go. I realise this last bit may sound a bit fluffy, but I won't achieve my mission by creating conflict or drama. And of course, my introverted nature and think, say, think communication style sets me up very well for this. Even my cage rattling is positively provocative rather than deliberately destructive. When I'm flourishing, I feel excited to breathe life into my vision by communicating it consistently, even if I'm met by crickets. And I often am. Not all introverts feel the need to respond, and many organisations may be fearful of acknowledging that they are harbouring and even perpetuating an extroversion bias. I also feel boundaried enough not to try to rescue others by doing a metaphorical CPR or kiss of life for where they are in their lives. Flourishing is a decision each of us make in our own time, so we each bear the responsibility of breathing life into our dreams, our intentions, and our goals. When I'm flourishing, I feel hopeful that any difficulty I'm now experiencing is temporary. And I trust that I'll know how to haul myself up out of there so that I can head towards my desired future. I also know that I may need to be kind to myself by resting and recharging a little whilst in the doldrums, rather than think I have to fight every moment of every day. I have no intention of languishing in the doldrums, just stilling myself long enough to recharge. When I'm flourishing, I trust my intuition and use it to balance my decision making. As a real thinker, it's taken me longer than the average bear to tune in and trust my intuition. But when I do, it's rarely wrong. And in those moments, I feel both supported by my intuition and also slightly spooked by it, as I can't explain it. And you know what? That's okay. So that's quite a powerful list of how I feel when I'm flourishing, and one that I'm going to keep in sight and keep adding to. One thing I notice is that I don't have any negative feelings when I'm flourishing, even when things are tough. And I'm a big fan of positive thinking, not toxic positivity though, as that's about denying our emotions. If I then look at this list in the context of Dr. Lynn Soot's definition of flourishing, which you know I absolutely love, she reminds us that flourishing is the product of the pursuit and engagement of an authentic life that brings inner joy and happiness through meeting goals, being connected with life passions, and relishing in accomplishments through the peaks and valleys of life. I think my feelings align with that really well. Soot herself is a positive psychologist, and the positive psychology movements say that flourishing moves beyond the confines of simple happiness or well-being. The founding father of flourishing, Dr. Martin Seligman, also part of the positive psychology movement, said flourishing is the result of paying careful attention to building and maintaining the 5 aspects to the PERMA model. These aspects, which are the foundations of human well-being and sought for their own sake rather than in service of a greater goal, are positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishments. I think each of those 5 is worth exploring in more depth on a later show. But for now, my invitation to you is to choose to flourish, especially if you want to feel more of those positive emotions. For me, it beats the alternative of choosing to dwell on the bleak side of life. As ever, let me know if you need support as you change your choice about how you live and experience your life. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, then please subscribe, rate us and leave a comment, because we know that helps other people find the podcast. And if other people find us, other introverts can flourish.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.